All right, so we should be live. Hope everyone is doing well this week. Just give me 1 second to pull up the chat. And if you guys can just let me know, just like usual, if you can hear me and see me, we will jump right into it. I'm wondering if, and you guys can let me know if I should try some different things on the lives. Probably won't this week, but maybe for next week. If I, instead of, I know we always get so far behind on the questions because there are a lot of questions and I answer them pretty, in a pretty full way, a pretty lengthy way, sometimes probably an overly verbose way, to be fair. But I'm wondering if it might make sense to try to stick to the bottom of the chat more, give shorter responses, and just kind of engage and hang out with you all a little bit more, if that might be more enjoyable, or if you prefer the really long, complete answers. So I think we can try out different things. Just interested in your guys' perspective around that. Looks like people are coming in and they can hear me and see me. Cool Trainer, Kamisi, Connor, Blue Goose Collectibles, Team Trubbish, Pokey Barn and Jonathan. Hey Kai, and Michael, and Vintage Pokemon Hunter Brother, CJ Dewar. Nice to see all of you guys. Thanks for hanging out. As usual, feel free to start to drop some questions in the chat. We're going to start with the Patreon questions as usual. A big thank you to all of the Patreon members out there. Really appreciate the continued support. Let's see here. Okay. So we're going to start with the Patreon questions. So I'm going to pull those up here. All right. So first question this week is, I'm curious on your opinion regarding first edition base set hollows, particularly in PSA 9. These had a meteoric rise during the Logan Paul break, but since have retraced extremely hard outside of the Charizard. The Blastoise was going for roughly 15k and has since come down to 6 to 8k. That's just one example, but the majority have retraced around 50%, and I don't really hear anyone talking about this. Prior to Logan Paul, there were maybe 1 to 2 on eBay, but now it seems there are 10 plus for many of these sitting. Do you think this is a short-term issue, or is there more first edition base 9s than people realize? I'm familiar with the pop reports on these, and they don't seem outrageously high considering these have been graded for years. I'm still fairly bullish on these, as finding mint ungraded cards is so rare and sealed product prices are through the roof. Thanks again. So, yeah, great question. We can definitely talk a little bit about first edition base in general here. So you brought up a couple of interesting points. One interesting point is how the Charizard does versus how the non-Charizard hollows do, and the rest of the set does. And another interesting point can also be how the 10s do versus the 9s, and that they don't always move together. Sometimes the 9s might retrace, but a 10 might not because there aren't enough of those 10s to go around, or the highest end collectors are only interested in 10s, and there are enough of those. And because there are so many 9s, there just aren't enough people willing to spend or able to spend $20,000-$30,000 on a PSA 9 Blastoise. There aren't enough to eat up all of that supply at those prices. Now, I think that definitely my answer is going to be filled with sort of speculation and just my opinion on these sorts of things. But I think that as far as, and I think really the crux of your question is base set first edition a good set to be buying, to investing in for the long run, and do I think these prices, since they've retraced, are low, or is that a good buy right now, or do I still think they're high? These types of things. So I've always been a proponent on this channel that base set first edition holos, outside of a small window this year, actually, when they were lagging behind. A lot of people don't know that before the Logan Paul booster break, first edition in general was really lagging. Around the time, you can go back on my channel, I made a big purchase of a first edition base set lot that I got for a very good deal on a full set of the rares, commons, and uncommons graded cards that I actually showed on the channel. Around that time, base set first edition in general, including the holos, was really lagging in price. All right. The rest of the sets had moved up a lot. Most had like doubled or tripled in value at that point from where they had been the previous year, and base set was actually sitting about the same. It was only maybe like 20% higher. So really, really huge difference. Around that time, a lot of people started talking about, or I started hearing tricklings that base set first edition was undervalued. People, the sort of oldest guard in the hobby, was surprised that base set first edition wasn't moving up as much. A lot of them owned that and owned big positions in that. What I think was happening was that the rarity of some of the other sets around that time, this is my explanation, the rarity of some of those other sets, which is something I always talk about on this channel, was proving to be the more important variable in prices, and because a lot of these cards from like Neo in particular, and ND series, and also, to be fair, from Jungle, Fossil, even Rocket, certainly the Gyms, the pop reports on a lot of those cards were actually less PSA 10s or comparable PSA 10s to base set first edition, and yet base set first edition at that time, the holos were going for a lot more than Jungle, Fossil, Gym, and Neo. And my theory was always like that didn't really make sense, and I felt that the gap would close. And then the gap, I think, did close, which made sense due to the rarity. Then what happened was the Logan Paul booster box break brought a bunch of new people into the hobby, and first edition base was the talk of the town. Everyone was talking about first edition base, and so I think that base set in general became way overinflated and overvalued. I sold the majority of my unlimited stuff, a little bit of my first edition stuff, although I hung on to the first edition in part because I think over the long run, it's such a good... First of all, I love them, but second, they're such good cards to have, and I think the upside in the long run is certainly there on them. But in the short run, those kind of larger corrections on a lot of those 9s, maybe 8s, I think were fairly predictable. When those corrections were going to come, it was unclear. So yeah, I'm not surprised by it. I don't think it doesn't change my opinion. I've had the same opinion on base set first edition the whole time, which is that it's and I think the difficult thing in determining is how much does it matter that it's the first set versus the fact that cards like the Neos are maybe rare. There are less of those booster boxes maybe ever printed, and there are less of those cards still out there. And how much is that going to matter in terms of price point, and what is the ratio that's going to settle at, is something that I think we're all going to have to watch. I do think with younger generations coming in, and with people being in the hobby longer now, you're seeing them trickle from base set to those other areas of the hobby, which I think is helping support the prices with the rarity aspect, which is why we really haven't seen retraces on a number of those types of cards, outside of a few outliers within each set. And that's the case across the board. Another thing that's really important when we think about retraces is some of these cards are rare enough that one low sale doesn't mean the whole market is retraced around that. So I'd be careful. We really want to see lots and lots of sales at a certain price. I do think that there are a lot of people who, from the sports card world and who didn't really know that much about Pokemon, but wanted to get engaged and interested and buying and selling because it was so hot, who came in, and I think that they targeted first edition base, which I think also created some price inflation beyond what collectors actually value these things at this point in time. I do think in the long run, though, These can be good items. Certainly, it's a much more attractive purchase at 6 to 8K for me than it would be at 15K for PSA 9 Blastoise. I would never in a million years pay, at this point in history, pay $15,000 for a PSA 9 first edition Blastoise. That's crazy to me. With $15,000, I could buy trophy cards. With $15,000, I could buy multiple trophy cards. I could buy 10 to 20 of certain cards I'm looking at that I really, I think have much more upside, and I'm much more interested in as a collector because of how rare they are, and I'd much rather just buy like a PSA 5 first edition Blastoise. Having that 9 doesn't really, isn't worth all of that extra for me versus what else I could do with that money. Now, in the future, $15,000 might make a lot of sense. $20,000 might, $30,000. These items can be pretty much any value that people decide they can be. There's no correct price that these things should be. It's all dictated by, the supply and demand at any one given time. What I'm looking at is what should the price be right now relative to what I think the actual interest is in, the actual interest in these cards is. And for me, there's too much. There is still inflation, speculation in those, and there are other options that have like zero hype, zero awareness that I think people are going to move into. Plus, you get newer generations who are more interested in second and third generation Pokemon, those types of things. That's been my argument all along. I also think that when you have to think about market cap, which is really important, and when first edition base holos have a much higher market cap right now because they're a lot more expensive than like a low pop jungle card. And so you don't need as many people to move the price on a low pop jungle card that's, considerably less, less overall market cap. For example, if we take like if we compare, I don't know, a Pop 100 card that's going for $15,000 or $10,000, let's say, and a Pop 100 card that's going for $1,000, it only takes $100,000 to buy up all of that one, and it takes $1 million to buy up the other. So that's a considerable amount of money that you need to keep that price up or push it higher. So those are the types of things I'd be thinking about. Also, there might be a lot of people who really want to, and would if they had the money, buy a PSA 9 first edition Blastoise at 15K. But there just aren't nearly as many people who have that type of money, where there are a lot more people who could buy a card for $1,000 and keep the price at $1,000. There's a lot more people who can afford that. That's the other really important part of demand, is someone may really want something and even be willing to pay a really high price if they had the money, but they simply don't have the money. Okay, so all right, that's the tricky place that base set first edition finds itself in, is that there's a lot of base set first edition, and yet it's really high price, versus trophies where it's really high price, but they're so few that you only need a few people with a lot of money. Something like first edition base, in order to sustain its really high prices and continue going up, really is predicated on strong demand and interest in the hobby, which is a risk. But also the plus side is when there's as long as demand stays really high and increases over the generations, they're also the cards that might do the best over time and might move the most due to that really high demand, particularly if the people who are interested in those cards have more disposable income to buy something like that. And it really becomes that sort of art, rather than buying fine art as they get into their 30s, 40s, and 50s, they're deciding to buy those cards. I'm a little skeptical of that, but we'll see. We'll see how many people are doing that and if it's enough to really buy up all the supply. I guess the last thing to mention on first edition bases, and the good part about first edition base is the vast majority of first edition base, mint and gem mint cards have been graded. So it's just not something you have to be worried about that those pop reports are going to explode, particularly the 10s. So that's very good news. Unlike Unlimited, where there's still so much Unlimited out there. All right, next question. Hi Jake, love the last vid. So much important info. Could you please delve into what you consider a trophy card, how trophy card status came to be, and what types of cards you could see becoming trophy cards in the future? I don't have enough experience to buy the cards considered trophies and wouldn't jump into that kind of risk without much more research. So the question goes on to say exactly what he's buying, but Okay. And then he says, if you have time, do you know much about the distribution of these championship cards and place cards? I can see the possibility of bricks of them possibly just sitting somewhere in the world. Yeah, so the trophy card could be used a couple of different ways, right? A trophy card, the idea of a trophy card could be used as, excuse me just one sec. Oops, sorry about that. The idea of a trophy card could be used as something that's like a prize possession, something that's one of the prize cards in the hobby and is a trophy of someone's collection. I've heard people use it more casually like that. I define a trophy card as any card that was awarded to someone for something within the Pokemon hobby, and where the card, and I think all the cards that fit this mold were all given away for free, is one really good way to see, is this a trophy or not. All right, so awarded to someone and awarded for free for their participation in some sort of event. So I think we have trophy cards that, in my opinion, are won at tournaments through gameplay. We have trophy cards that are won for art competitions. We have trophy cards, and this would be maybe one of the more arguable ones. We have trophy cards that were awarded for doing certain things with the Pokemon Company or for the Pokemon Company. For example, like the play promo cards or the fan club cards are those trophy cards. And I think you'd have different people debating, is that a trophy card? Does that really meet the criteria? You'd probably have some people that would just consider the cards given out as awards at the tournaments for play as trophy cards. It really doesn't matter at the end of the day. It's semantics. I use in my definition of trophy cards, there are trophy cards that are very rare, and there are trophy cards that aren't that rare. And so there are trophy cards that are very expensive, and there are trophy cards that aren't really that expensive. Okay, and again, my definition just being anything that's won. Okay, for something that you did. And for me, I would consider the fan club cards to be trophies of your accomplishment or something that you did. Although I think it certainly doesn't feel like I think the importance of the trophy and the historical nature of the trophy is going to be connected to the event and the thing that you did to win that. So I really love like the Art Academy cards, for example, which I view as trophy cards of sorts, because they were, or the Pikachu Illustrator, those types of cards, because I just think that it's so cool that like they had those competitions where lots of artists like created art of their favorite Pokemon, and they chose some of them and made cards out of them. And those are very exclusive. There are about 100 of them in the world. They're supposed to be 100, but there are some extra copies that have surfaced, as a lot of these things. Part of your question here is things like Misaki promos you mentioned and Holo Championship cards. Yeah, so I don't know exactly how many of those, for example, like cards that I do think were always pretty undervalued and now have really come into popularity. Cards like those, like EX Dragon, like Charmander, Charmeleon, Holo Championship cards, those types of things. I don't know offhand how many of those are out there. The Misaki cards, there were about 25,000 to 35,000 of them estimated of each of them. So there are a lot of them, right? That's a lot more than 100 only. But as we can see, even when there are 25,000 or 30,000 or whatever, not that many of them make it, all these years. A lot of them are probably in private collections raw. And they had issues like they had this Misaki mark, it's called, because the way they were handed out, that there's this little dent on the back that causes them to not grade, above a 7 in most cases, even above a 6 in a lot of cases. And so getting them in high grade is very difficult. Misaki cards could be considered a trophy card because they were awarded for free for trading in some cards that you got from the vending series. I like all these cards. I think they're all great. I think what's important to think about when we think about price point and what they should be going for, you have to think about the historical nature of the release. Is it important? Is it interesting? Rarity, and the art. And does it have unique art? Does it have art that people like? Does it have popular Pokemon on it? The same type of stuff. And then your last question here about the championship cards and the place cards. Yeah, so not every year, but there's different years they distributed them in different amounts. The staff cards were distributed out to all the staff at the World Championship. We don't know how many staff there were each year, and we also don't know how many cards were given out to each staff. According to people I've talked to, the higher the staff, the more important the staff, the more cards they got. Some staff even got like 5 cards, I've heard. Maybe even more. So that's all important to note. In terms of like bricks of them being out there, that could be true for anything. In terms of just like the Pokemon Company having extra copies. The actual stamped cards with the different places, they're very rare cards. And you can do the math on them. Generally, there were for the newer ones, there are 6 categories: 3 for the TCG, 3 for the VCG. Some of my favorite cards in the hobby. I think they're super underrated. All right. Okay, last question for today. I remember you sharing, the last thing to mention on the last one is there were some years where they were given out where you only got the one from your place, i.e. if you finished in as a semifinalist, you only received the semifinalist card. That happened in like 2004, for example, which is why it's the rarest year and most expensive year, and you don't ever see those stamped cards. In other years, and particularly with the Champions Festival years, where they also added a champion stamp, which started which only exists on the Champions Festival cards. Before that, the finalist was the highest stamp you could get. On those cards, if you placed like first, if you won the tournament, you would receive every card, 1 or 2. Some years I've heard you could receive 2 of every card. Depends on the year. Of each one of those cards. And so when you think, so that's why the like top 16 and the top 32 are quite a bit more, they're quite a bit more out there than the quarterfinalist, semifinalist, finalist, champion, etc. However, again, I think those cards are criminally underrated. Now they've gone up a lot. They've been probably one of the best movers in the past few months. As things have been correcting, those have been really exploding in value. They've just been disappearing. There's still some out there, but you know, they're selling for triple what they were selling for a few months ago. They're still crazy undervalued as compared to other things in the hobby. Now, they're very expensive, so I think you have to be really careful with buying anything in this type of market, particularly niche stuff. But all I can do is give you my opinion. I think that if people knew about those, if those were widely known about, if some of the biggest YouTube channels talked about those into the more casual Pokemon fan, and people were really talking about them as some of the most important cards in the hobby, most interesting cards in the hobby, you would see, you'd see them potentially go up a lot more, just because they're so hard to find. And they're hard to find in mint condition, and a lot of the players don't want to sell them because they're their personal trophy cards. All right, last question. I remember you sharing with PokeGal that Pokemon was a joyful retreat when childhood was challenging. What other activities or places gave you joy? Connecting with nature, friendships, music. Yeah, definitely was great as a kid, particularly the Game Boy game and then opening packs and building out a binder set. 2 things I loved as a kid. What other activities or places give you joy or gave you joy? As a kid or as an adult, I'm not sure exactly which one you're asking, but as a kid, I love sports. I played basketball, football, baseball, soccer, all year round. I was on teams and played sports. Yeah, loved camping. Like when you say connecting with nature, yeah, big fan of camping, hiking, mountain climbing, skiing, love that stuff growing up. Music's always been a big part of my life. I'm a musician. I've been a singer and a guitar player and pianist for 15 plus years. A cappella groups and bands and different sorts of things. So stuff that I love to do. I'll probably maybe I'll make some more music of those music videos that people seem to like the last one. So maybe I'll make some more funny things and different musical stuff. But yeah, so all that stuff. I love games. I love chess and poker. I was a big poker player for a while. Yeah. All right. So I think I'm going to take a few questions and then I'm going to hang out. I'm going to hang out in the chat I'm going to head to the bottom of the chat. First question is by Connor B. It says, any thoughts on Strixhaven? I haven't checked it out yet. I will check it out. Magic the Gathering just has never been something that appealed to me that much. I really actually like the gameplay, but collecting the cards just never appealed to me. But I will check it out soon. I'm hearing like really great things. Everyone's saying that it's really good. It's really beautiful cards. So I definitely need to check it out, Connor. Coyote Bacon says, hey Jake, I feel you didn't really answer if Evolution's booster boxes will be 10K or not. We did at the end of the video. Of course they will, right? Of course, as long as YouTubers keep talking about them and pushing them up and saying how great they are. Professor Oak says, can we write a song together as a group this week? A lot of you guys saying that you really enjoyed the last video. I'm glad it was funny. So I wrote the lyrics and came up with the idea, but so much of the credit obviously goes to my editor, Def Drew, who we worked together on some of the ideas for the background, like the dancing Charizards and different elements that I was hoping would be in there. But he came up with a lot of it and also found all the graphics and put it all together. So big shout out to him for that, and we'll do more of those because you guys really like it, and it's good to summarize the themes and the different things we're talking about in a more like, comical, funny way. Michael Bowerman says, thoughts on low pop DNP, PSA 9 and 10s. Picked up a PSA 9 Moltres from Majestic Dawn for €80 pop 18, only 8 in pop 10. Just feels too cheap, especially given it's an original 151. Certainly a much better deal than buying like the modern stuff that's going for higher or more than that. I think the regular holos from these types of generations, are cool cards. I think that you're going to see people who grew up with those more want to collect those, want to buy those. I think the problem is going to be, are they going to get lost in some of those less popular middle generations? But for $80, €80, it's not that much money. I will say that card, those types of cards, I was buying those types of cards about a year ago for, barely anything because there was no market, and I was able to get pretty decent amount of mint cards from those eras, So I think that you do have to be careful with more of those cards being graded. However, at €80, that's pretty good, I think, because particularly what I'm seeing other things go for, just because the grading fees are probably going to be so much high going forward that to grade those types of cards is going to cost you maybe 20, 30, 40, $50. So that's already eating a huge amount of it. So if you want like a PSA graded card from that generation, if that eats up like half the price, you only need the 9 to be worth or the card itself to be worth like 30, 40, $50. Seems more reasonable. I'm not sure those cards have like huge upside potential, but my worry would be like in this environment, if things are like below 200, you know, it, like lots of stuff that's definitely gonna collapse is selling for like 200 in a PSA 10. The thing I do like about those is they do have more vintage feel. The packs are going to be pretty expensive. That's going to matter. There's so much less product and supply than there is with the modern stuff, the ultra modern stuff, or however we want to talk about it. So I would try to stick more towards the secret rares and towards level X's and things like that. But if the price gets into that sort of good range or even lower, probably not too bad of a pickup. Blue Goose Collectible says, what about having conversations with viewers on Discord? I know you wanted more discourse with your viewers and wanted that chat house as an option. Discord might be a good alternative. Yeah, so and I've said this on my Patreon to people, but I can say it here too. I am hanging out in Squeak's Discord a fair amount of the time. Like, I've been going in there like once or twice a week just to hang out and talk with people. So if you want to join Squeak's Discord, just because it's easier, Squeaks and I and Radar love hanging out and talking Pokemon anyway. So it just made more sense to combine forces a little bit and for me to just join what they already established and built, rather than me starting some sort of like competing space where the same type of conversations would be happening. Just more fun having us all in one place to do it together. So that's why I didn't start my own Discord. So I think on most of Squeak's videos, or at least Pokemon Radar's videos, you can find a link to that Discord, and I can put one in this video after it comes out. If you guys want to join that, come hang out. All right. Hey, First Edition Outlet, nice to see ya. Glad you're here with us. I'm hoping you're going to put out some more videos at some point, man. Jonathan Prisby says, hey, Jake, what exactly is price stickiness, and how do you think it relates to the current market? Do you expect prices to retrace closer to 2019 prices, or do you think newer prices will stick? Yeah, so price stickiness just means, is a price more established, or is it less established? Technically, we could say price stickiness. I mean, these are all just semantic terms, but we could say something isn't sticky if it goes up a lot too, but we tend to use stickiness somewhat for prices and more so, I think, for people staying in the hobby, being engaged, sticking into the hobby, not burning themselves out, not getting bored and leaving, those types of things. But in terms of price stickiness, yeah, generally cards that have sold for the longest amount of time, cards that have the longest amount of sales history, and cards that have the most completed, filled out population reports, because most of the mint or gem mint cards have already been graded. Those are the cards that we would expect to see the most price stickiness or have the most established prices over time. As far as the whole market, which is kind of your question, do I think that the whole market, where are these prices going to stick? I don't unfortunately have the answer to that. Do I think that it will retrace closer to 2019 prices? I think that certain things, I would imagine, if I had to throw out a completely speculative nonsense guess, but I guess an educated guess, I think that probably a lot of things have already retraced most of the way. They might have a little bit more. Some of the items we talked about today might have a little bit more. I think other items are probably already there in the vintage world. I think that we're gonna have to see what's at PSA, in this vintage market. I do wonder when there's going to be lots and lots of more 7s and 8s and 6s on the market, which there's going to be, like way more first edition holo 6s, 7s, and 8s. Is that going to affect the 9s and 10s? Is it going to act as an anchor and drag those prices down? Because now people would rather pay less for a lower grade than pay up for those higher grades. Like, what's going to happen there? It's all going to be, we're all just going to have to watch and find out. As far as retracing back to 2019 prices, I think that there are more people interested in collecting and investing in Pokemon than there were before 2020, and I don't think we're going back. I think even if the market falls another 20, 30, 40% globally, 50%, we're not going back. There's always going to be more interest. Now, there are some cards that I think people probably got overzealous with and sent in way too many and are grading way too many, and those cards are going to potentially even go lower than they were in 2019 or around the same price. And will just basically be the cost of grading and maybe won't even sell. But outside of that, I wouldn't worry too much. I'm not worried about it going before that. I think people who were built the prices that were in 2019 aren't going anywhere. I think the majority of those people are here to stay, and so any additional people we added in 2020, which I think is quite a bit, they may come and go. They're speculating on different things, but some of them will stay, which will inherently increase the prices. We're going to have newer generations getting interested. We're going to have more money in the hobby. So all of those forces seem to be working in the positive over time. I'm also encouraged that people are just thinking more critically, and I do think there's probably people are overly negative right now. When I started this channel, when I was making videos about 2 months into the channel, 3 months into the channel, people were way too positive, in my view, really rationally exuberant. Now I think people are a bit rationally pessimistic in some areas. I think in part because people have spent a lot of money, have lost a lot of money, and are a little bit burned out. And so they're seeing things through their emotions rather than through sort of a logical, long-term supply and demand type model. But at the end of the day, it's lots of speculation and it's all risk. Neely says, do you think PSA 9s of base set first edition are worth picking up now, or will the market be flooded soon? I think what we're seeing is there were a lot of overzealous people who were buying things to flip. And probably a lot of collectors who were holding, waiting to sell at the high, who have now got caught in that sort of downward movement, and they're sort of undercutting each other, which is lowering the market. I don't expect the market to be any more flooded than it is right now. I think that there, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them on the market at any one time is fairly flooded for those types of cards. I think a lot of these cards are in fairly permanent homes, and are being constantly put into more permanent homes. So I'm not expecting like huge floods, like where we see 30, 40 of them or something, on the market at any one time, 20, 30, that sort of thing. But and I've been saying this all along, and warning people all along that there's just been so much irrational exuberance this year because these cards were not hard to find, and they were always on eBay, and there were so many people wanting to sell always throughout the entire year. And yet there was this intense fear of missing out because people were talking so much on YouTube and other places about how, you gotta buy now, they're all going to disappear, they're all going to go into collections, these sorts of things. And from my perspective, it's like I don't think a lot of collectors, or that many collectors, were buying at these higher prices. It felt like a lot of flippers selling to other flippers. And for me, it was going to retrace back to some sort of floor of collector interest and people who have, or longer-term investors like me who have more confidence in the actual hobby. I think a lot of people buying and selling Pokemon cards don't have any real confidence in the long-term future of the hobby and are more interested in the hype. Bluegus Collectible says, what is the most pristine condition card you own in your collection? I'm not really sure. I don't own any BGS 10s. So I don't have any like BGS 10s or black labels. Lots of PSA 10s and some BGS 9.5s. So in terms of like a grading, PSA 10s are my most. In terms of, I'm sure some of my PSA 10s are quite perfect. Off the top of my head, I don't really remember which ones. Cool Trainer Kamisi says, I'm getting into soccer cards, crazy money, and I just bought a PSA 10 prize Cristiano Ronaldo. Yeah, everyone is hopping on the card bandwagon. That's been going on for about 2 months with soccer cards, and lots of hype, lots of speculation, lots of speculators selling to other speculators. Again, it's the same thing that happened in Pokemon. That market is going to also is all there's a bubble forming in the soccer card market, just like there was a bubble that formed in the Pokemon card market. Same exact thing. So hopefully people can learn that pattern, and you can engage in that sort of hype and try and make profit, but there's that gamble of you're the one holding the bag or the one buying it at the peak of that sort of like hype of it's just going to go up forever, that sort of feeling. And there's a certain group of people kind of move from hobby to hobby who operate like that. Now that being said, it doesn't mean that soccer's at its and I haven't studied that market enough to really know how much more latent demand is there out there, how many different all these different countries that are interested in soccer that are also maybe potentially interested in the cards, trying to collect the graded cards. I follow it a little bit, Mbappe and all the sports card talk around how great some of these cards have been doing and how much money people have been making and the market that's really been created out of nothing. There was really almost no market for this before, so it's interesting. A lot of parallels and similarities to Pokemon. Maybe a little bit more risk in some ways. Eusebius says, whoa, was that the one that was... Oh, sorry, you're having a conversation with someone. Tom Denny says, question. Hey, Jake, really interested to hear your perspective on the future growth of the Koro Mew card, even in lower grades like in a 8. So there were a lot of those shining cards. So it's a gorgeous, amazing, beautiful card. Like one of the most beautiful cards, right? Just incredible cards. Shining Mew. It's an awesome card. Problem, the only drawback is there were a lot of those. How many of those are out there, I have no idea. But if the Pop Report has anything to say about it, there are a lot of them. I see them all the time. When I would buy Japanese collections, often or somewhat often would find that in there. So, that card is, from my perspective, nowhere near the rarity as something like a Masaki promo, even though it gets about the same price, because it's a Shining Mew, which I totally get. So I think those are the positives and negatives. But how many of those are out there? Maybe it is comparable to the Masaki promos. Maybe it isn't much more than 35,000 for it, but I think it's a lot more, personally. But I don't really know. Someone probably knows the answer to that. I just don't know it offhand. Someone in the chat can probably... I know we have so many knowledgeable people who engage here and watch. If you can just give the answer to if you know like the distribution of that would be helpful for people. Bobby Brawler says, hey, I hope you're okay. Greetings from the UK. Thoughts on crashing, but more specifically certain markets within the market, e.g. modern versus vintage. I watched 22 hours of graded gem sum videos. And about 90% was modern, 5% unlimited, and the rest first edition and old. Do you think the modern mass monster will affect the vintage, or do you think vintage will stay strong? Cheers. My other part may be above. Yeah, I think vintage has already corrected. I think vintage is extremely undervalued as compared to modern right now. That's going to become very, very apparent to people eventually. I have pretty strong conviction in that. I both think that vintage should be more popular than it is, and I believe in the demand side of vintage more than I believe. I much more believe in the generational demand side of Wizards of the Coast than I believe in the generational demand interest in in Vivid Voltage, some set in the middle of Pokemon, right? It just makes no sense. So I don't think people are thinking long-term on the demand side, and then on the supply side, demand side is more debatable, but on the supply side, it's going to be no contest. And also the amount of gem mint and mint, it's all going to be gem mint and mint. A lot of the vintage being sent off, or the vast majority of the vintage, even though it's only 5% or 2% or whatever it is not mint condition and gem mint hollows, right? There's an even smaller subsection that is that. So, yeah, I know people have started. I mean, I've been talking about that forever. I know lots of channels are starting to use those talking points and talking about that stuff more in the community. I think it's good to get that message out there. I think, unfortunately, certain channels that talk a lot about Great Modern is hasn't really adequately explained that, and never talked about the investment upside of lots of these things without ever talking about the dangers of the supply side. And unfortunately, yeah, that's going to put a damper, and we might lose a lot of people from the hobby, and we might have a lot of people being really salty and angry and upset. It's unfortunate. And that might have a trickle effect into vintage to some extent, but I think overall, it won't, and I also think it will actually strengthen vintage, and because people will really start to understand like what rarity looks like, what rarity feels like, and if they want to buy things again or invest again or collect again, they're going to want to buy things that hold value, that can sustain value. And if you are gonna invest in modern and do modern, I think black labels are interesting. Particularly black labels of like a shiny Charizard or some sort of Charizard, I think are interesting. You're really relying heavily on condition qualifier, because how much more are people going to pay for a black label than just a regular PSA 10 when there are tens of thousands, 30,000, whatever it is, of those 10s out there and or 9s. I'm not sure exactly. That worries me a little bit, but that will actually be somewhat of a challenge and provide some sort of rarity. And if we look back in 30 to 40 years and we say Hidden Fates, for example, is this monster success and this monster set that people are still talking about, and they're still making shining type sets that remind people of Hidden Fates. And, that Hidden Fates Charizard might be doing okay, might be doing pretty well and be able to go up in price over time. But then the black label might see this really huge thing because it gives some chase to something that otherwise has no chase or almost no chase. And yet is really a crucial part of Pokemon history. So I hope that makes sense. This is how I think. That's how I suggest people think about these things in the long run. But the farther you get out like that, the more speculative it is. And the more assumptions I'm making that may or may not be true. So you really can't put too much faith or stock into it, and into those types of speculative thoughts and ideas. But it's interesting to talk about, and can be somewhat useful to consider those types of things when you're making your purchasing decisions. And if you're going to buy modern, yeah, going for that or going for those really desirable cards, those interesting cards, those cards that do at least have a really difficulty to pull rate, they're going to have the best chance of standing the test of time and of dealing with this print run issue that we're having, which is where there's just going to be so much product out there. And I think another thing that can save it is if Pokemon does sustain its popularity and gets more popular. We may look back on this period as sort of a silver age, to use a comic book term, of Pokemon, in the sense that, I don't think we will, but in the sense that I think we're going to look back on it as the junk, as that there was far too much printed of some things. But we might look back on it and say, now they're really printing a lot, right? In 10 years, they might be printing 10 times the amount they're printing now. Then we might look back on this time and say, this stuff actually was fairly investable, because there's so much more demand now. There's plenty of demand to eat up the stuff that's existing now. Now, my argument with that, though, would be still vintage is going to be to the moon, right? If that scenario happens, vintage still is much better. And this is something that I think people... yeah, I guess I'll end the answer there. Okay, Brent says, hey Jake, how do you feel about the Play promo Gold Stars? I noticed in your promo video you said that Jolteon was the one you were still holding. Why was that? What's your opinion on the Umbreon value? I like them. They're very expensive. When I was buying them, I was buying them raw and getting them much cheaper. They're very expensive. You can get those arts in English or just in Japanese from the regular sets, and then with the only caveat being that the Espeon and the Umbreon come in a holo version in the Play promo, which is cool, versus a non-holo version. They're better trophies to me. There are cards that I find far more interesting as trophies than those, but the market isn't necessarily going to agree with me. I would prefer to buy a trophy card that is a bit more niche, that is a bit that's a much lower price, and it has equal rarity probably, and is historically really interesting, and has unique art for me personally at those prices. But they're great cards, really cool looking. Should be super valuable, should be super sought after and coveted. They just, the realm of price on some of those things. I don't put those cards on nearly the level of like the Tropical Wind, like the TMB. Tropical Wind. Like those cards to me will never be anywhere near those early, original competition, or close to original, some of the first ever trophies given out. It's night and day for me, and I think in the long run, I expect people to see that and understand that, but I'm not sure if they will. The pro of them is that they're hollow, they're cool looking, they're of gold stars, which is easily recognizable and valuable, and then they're also the evolutions. Okay. So I'm going to skip around a little bit here. VVV says, in terms of grading, do you think centering takes precedence over whitening on edges of the card? Basically, which one does PSA look at more importantly when grading? They look at all of them. I'm not really sure. I think that ideally, and I think they try to look at all of them, and that they're all important. I would say, I think that they seem to care a little bit more about centering now than they used to, and they also seem to care a little bit more about lack of whitening than they used to. I feel like I used to be able to get away with like 8s fairly easily, and I used to be able to get like 10s that were a little bit off-centered, and I do think that things have gotten a bit stricter overall. But then I get these cards that are just, 10s or that aren't perfect, and 9s that are, and whatever. Alex Ryan says, hey Jake, I was wondering what your opinion on the Tropical Wind stamped Worlds promos from 2007 to 2009, and do you think that Pokemon will ever reintroduce the Worlds promo as Tropical Wind? I don't know if they'll ever have more Tropical Winds. I certainly can't ever see them reusing any art from any year. I think that's part of why I love them so much, is that they come out with a new art each year that corresponds to the World event. It's how can you beat that? Do I think that they will and just my overall opinions on those, love them. 2007's the hardest one of those three to get, but 2008, 2009, very difficult years to find, very, very difficult. Very difficult to find any cards from those, and they're drying out by the day. And I think they're really going into people's collections, which is what I like to see too. I think the stickiness of these types of items, these are sort of like, a lot of these types of items can become like once in a lifetime type items. Set cards are probably not going to ever achieve that outside of some of the PSA 10. Particularly as you get into like the finalist stamp, champion stamp, but even quarterfinalist, semifinalist, top 16, top 32. The staff ones, generally, particularly on years where they have lots of staff and no one really knows, definitely more common. I think a good option though is to get the unstamped ones, or the ones that just have the stamp, the world stamp, and not the staff or player stamp, are great options as well if you like these and want to collect them. First edition outlet says, Jake, there are a lot of unknowns about this, but just seeing your thoughts. 10 years from now, do you see a substantial price difference between PSA cards pre-AI and post-AI grading? I know there are cards with such low pops that they might not have many AI versions, but besides that point, yeah, that's the exact point that I made over on PokeNav's channel with Z from Z&G Emporium and Radar. That's what I'm thinking about with the AI, is how's that going to affect the and I kind of talked at length there, so maybe I'll refer you guys to watch that video if you want to hear my answers on that. You touched on one of the main points I made, which is that I think for the rarer cards, it may not have as much of an issue because there probably won't be any new PSA 10 AI grades or 1 or 2 or 3 only. So I don't think you have to worry about that radically shifting anything. Now, those might have a really high premium potentially, but I don't think it's going to like really hurt the value of the other ones. But if you have a card where there's going to be lots and lots of those AI ones and they really are a lot better and become more desirable, and there are lots of those options, I could see it really hurting those types of markets and those types of cards. So, but definitely it's just super speculative. Magnus says, thanks for the awesome content. You're welcome. What is your opinion on subgrades when grading? I have a full first edition non-holo base set that I'm planning to sub before the CGC price hike. I like subgrades. They're great. They really help you know what the grader's looking at. It breaks down the card. I wish PSA had subgrades, although on the other hand, it is nice having that 10 versus the 9.5. I kind of wish that they all had just 9.5s and the 10s were much more difficult to find. I think it would have been better if PSA had adopted that also and we had one standard. I think it's going to be difficult when we have these PSA 10s versus these 9.5s in the other hobby. And are the 9.5s 10s? Are they below the 10s? What are they going to be in the long run? It creates a... It's not the best thing for the hobby in a lot of ways that we're grading at multiple different grading companies and that the grading companies all have their own standards and scales. It's not the best. We'll see how it all ends up though. Jody asks, so what's the latest TCG product that you purchased, Jake? My latest purchase is, let's see. Oh, so I just bought some Mega Man for fun. I bought 6 booster boxes, 2 of each set that I'm gonna open just by myself. I love opening old vintage cheap product for fun, off channel. I bought some of that. I bought an Austin Powers box for like nothing, for like 0, because I think it looks cool, and I liked Austin Powers growing up. It's like this vintage Austin Powers. And I bought, I think it cost me like $7 for a whole booster box. And then I bought, it was in a deal with other things. And then I bought, what else did I buy? There was something else in it too, like Speed Racer or something. Just this old vintage lot of fun booster boxes that'll be fun to open up and explore. So, outside of that, haven't been able to make any Pokemon purchases. I'm starting to watch Pokemon again, and I've been bidding on a few items. I just haven't won any of them. They're still going a little bit above what I'm wanting to pay. But I'm interested in those things. Definitely keeping my ear out for large lots. So still buying DBZ. Bought some a couple ultra rares. Hopefully one that's going to be very minty to add to my mintier pile to send out for BGS grading. When's my first album gonna drop? Adam asks. But for real, like I did want to be a professional musician when I was younger. Not necessarily full time, but I wanted to do it like part time, and was definitely very serious about music. I was a music minor, performance minor, and I took 10 years of voice lessons and was in multiple bands and multiple a cappella groups. And I'm out of practice now, but yeah, that's sort of something about me, I guess, that was hidden from some of you guys, although I've talked about it a little here and there when people have asked me. Oh, and then Magnus had a second part to his question. I have a full first edition non-holo base set that I'm planning. I plan on keeping it. Do you think it's worthwhile paying for getting subgrades? The set is in LPM and I'm not really sure. It's in terms of like, I think for you, like, I want the subgrades. I like being able to see the subgrades. It's a better product for me. I think as far, if you're gonna keep them and you like them better, and it'll make you happier to have those subgrades, you should get them. If you're gonna flip the cards, might not be worth getting the subgrades. I'm not really sure. It's sort of tough. I think ironically too, or not ironically, it's the wrong word, but another thing that you can't predict is, like, if you were gonna get, like, if you get a 9.5 that has high subgrades, having the subgrades on there is much better. If you have a 9.5 with low subgrades, not having the subgrades on there is better. So, but you can't predict that or plan for that. So, sort of I would say a coin flippy situation. I think you can make cases on either side. I think you should do what you would enjoy the most, and also financially, if you have the money to do something like that, I wouldn't be putting too much money into something like that. That it puts you in a financially tricky situation. Let's see. So we've got so many questions here. I guess we'll do a few more here in the middle, and then maybe jump to the bottom. Blitzford says, would you say CGC is almost too strict with their grading? I feel as though my CGC returns are filled with negative emotion from viewers and content creators when no CGC 10s are returned. I don't think they're too strict with their grading. I think it's a matter of, like, the reality of, like, if you are sending to CGC, you're not going to get a lot of 10s. You get a lot more PSA 10s than you would get CGC 10s, and how is the market reflecting that? And then you have to make that decision. Obviously, with PSA, for all intensive purposes, closed for the majority of cards that aren't very expensive, where it's worth sending in for that $300 fee, you have no other option. I don't want CGC to change. I like the way they grade. I think grading tougher is better. Now, would I grade? Now, if just speaking about money and being a flipper, I would be careful, and it's not attractive to grade with CGC right now in the current market as compared to PSA because of that. So it really is going to have to be something where, like, the market has to really start viewing CGC as, like, the toughest grader, and that those 9.5s are theoretically like 10s or whatever. And I'm not sure if that's ever going to happen. It could. I wouldn't say never, but I think, it certainly isn't there now, and I'm not sure exactly how it's going to get there. Niwi says, do you see Spanish vintage booster boxes appreciating in the future as buying power increases? Not sure. I'm not sure about other languages. Sorry to just dodge the question, but I've been asked that a number of times. I'm really not sure. Arcel Shaw says, I'm having difficulty selling some of my cards. Do you think the market is not as liquid right now? It depends on the card that you have. It's certainly not as liquid as it was. There was a time when people would post something and you'd have 3 people within 5 seconds sending you multiple messages trying to get you to sell to them. But I would say the market still is quite liquid. There's a lot of interest, and it's very easy to auctioning off things. So things are still getting very high prices, and but yeah, I mean, it's definitely like, if you're trying to get like really high prices on certain cards, it's definitely not going to be, it's not going to be super liquid. I think it depends on the card. Exia Cole says, hey Jake, thoughts on Dragon Ball Super and the trophies there? Has been talks of 100k plus for certain metal trophies. It looks promising. Not sure. So trophies in Pokemon I know a little bit more about. it's interesting to see if they will ever develop a market. I know there are guys right now paying lots of money for Pokemon trophies from like the first few Pokemon competitions. I know your questions about DBZ. I just don't know a lot about that, about the actual physical trophies. Yeah, people are paying a lot of money. They're paying a lot less for those than for the cards, though. So will they ever be equal? I'm not really sure. Should they be equal? That's something for people to decide. The trophies are really, really cool looking, I will say. So, the physical trophies. Bubble Squad says, so how does MetaZoo feel in person? Not the market price or potential, but the quality of the cards and aesthetic of the packs / boxes. I have to admit that I like MetaZoo. I think it's fun. I think it's cool. I like the art. I like the cards. We'll have to see how it does in the long run. Just from a purely subjective perspective, I enjoy it. I'm surprised that other people have such a negative opinion of it, particularly from the Pokemon world, as I think the art style and the feel is very similar to Pokemon. To me, I like it because it's like it's kind of a gorier, more adult, grown-up-y, horror-ish Pokemon feel with like monsters, which I like, or beasties as they call them. I think the gameplay there's probably stuff to be hammered out. And there are elements that I've heard are a bit broken, but that if they get more, as they release more sets, they'll probably correct for that type of thing. Get more bring more balance into the game. I have no idea how it's going to do in the long run. It could easily, people might forget about it in a few months, and it could easily get overshadowed by like another card game that comes out if we see more games coming out. I also think if Pokemon dips and overall interest kind of dies down a little bit, MetaZoo as well, the prices will go down and will be hurt. That being said, do I think there's a chance that that could be successful long term? Do I see a path for that, particularly through collectability? I do. I think the cryptids idea is like a home run. I think that people are really interested in cryptids. They really love cryptids, and there are so many cryptids around the world with really interesting, cool stories. And I think the idea of creating a Pokemon for adults that as we get older and Pokemon collectors and lovers, creating some sort of like horror game for like nerdy adults who like TCGs is really smart. I'm not sure how big that market is, but stuff for like the Kickstarter products and the sample cards, there are so few of them that the prices may end up being high on them. I do think that they're crazy artificially high right now, given the fact that a lot of the Kickstarter booster boxes I don't even think have been given out. I think Michael, the CEO, just still has them. I think the company still has maybe the majority of them or a lot of them. So I think that although there are 2,500 Kickstarter booster boxes that were made, there are probably, who knows, there may only be a few hundred in circulation, which is part of why they're so difficult to come by and get such a high price. But I have no idea. It's all speculation. So we'll see. I'm planning on buying some product when it comes out to give it a try. And as you guys know, I love collecting. I love cards. This is right up my alley. I love new cards. I love collecting other stuff than just Pokemon, even though Pokemon's definitely my the heart of it all for me and where it all started and as a kid, and will always be the heart, I think, of my interest and experience and the community where I have most of my friendships and relationships. I'm not sure how you can love Pokemon and not like love these other TCGs and other types of stuff. So, in terms of like the feel, I'm not a big. So I think like I have some of them here actually next to me. I'm not a. I can show like. I'm not a huge fan personally of the red outline, a border, and I'm not a huge fan of the text, but just the art in itself and the hollow pattern and the characters and the design I really like. In terms of the feel of the cards, like the stock of the cards, it feels okay. A little bit thin, a little bit of warping issue. But I like the booster box. I like the map that comes with it. And I like the overall feel of the product, and it's really fun opening because there's a holo or reverse in every pack, and there are lots of different creatures and characters, and that's very fun. So every single pack's really like fun and enjoyable to open, I found. Nicholas Arellano says, have you ever submitted to Beckett? I have never submitted to Beckett. I'm actually going to do my first Beckett submission this year. I've always submitted to PSA. The only reason I'm submitting to Beckett is because I'm submitting Dragon Ball Z, and they do a better job with DBZ. Pokemon, I'm still not submitting anywhere else other than PSA. For me personally, I'm going to wait for PSA to reopen until I send it in, or I'm going to have to see the market really start to value these CGC and BGS cards, which I don't think they do right now. The rest of your question is that you've dropped off some really expensive package with them and you're concerned because you haven't heard back from them. I've heard that they take a really long time. It's super slow. So. Indub says, based off PSA's recent numbers, 20 to 25,000 cards per day, I'm estimating 1.5 to 2 million new graded cards by the end of the year. Do you think the hobby really has the capacity to absorb that many cards? No, I don't. I think too many flippers and people are sending huge lots in to sell, to resell, not to put into their collection for the market to absorb a lot of those cards. I definitely don't think there is that type of market for some cards. Now, but we'll see. I do think there's a growing interest of like card stores starting to carry PSA cards, and I think that when we think about like, you know, small town America and you know, small towns or small cities across the world who might be interested in Pokemon and have a card shop, I think there's a place for a lot of those slabs to actually end up in those areas. For people to buy in person, and just the excitement of a kid buying their very first slabbed card and that it's graded, and there's a lot of excitement in all of that. And I think that there will hopefully be able to be bought up over time and absorbed over time, because Pokemon is such a global thing, and there's so many kids today who might be interested in it down the line. Jake, have you ever seen an example where a pop for a card doesn't move for a long time and then spikes dramatically, where a whale might have sent in hundreds to thousands of the same card in PSA sub? Not hundreds to thousands I've never seen, but I've certainly seen like 20, 30, 40 at once. And that's definitely happening now. Definitely. Trombone Guy says, one more question before Trombone. Parker Kish says, will you be sending cards to CGC, Jake? If not, what would it take? Just as I was saying before, I won't until I see the prices equaling to PSA. Should I buy Pokemon cards and then I probably still wouldn't send to CGC. I'd still send to PSA because it's always been the company and where the majority of my collection is. Unless I feel like it's cheaper or it's easier, I would consider it. Parker Kish says, will you be sending cards to CGC? Oh, sorry, that's what I just read. What I will say is, though, that is nothing against CGC. I think CGC is doing a phenomenal job. I simply go off what the market is doing, and I don't have faith that the market is going to ever view 9.5s equal to PSA 10s. And if I'm not predicting that, I'm just not sure. I really have no idea, and so why would I put myself in that sort of risk? Trombone Guy says, authentic question. Don't read it as rude because it's not. Okay. Why do you invest and sell? Why not just collect? Curious to know your thoughts. I just collect. I don't like letting any of my cards leave. Sure. So I think it's a great question. So I guess a couple of things. So the reason that I sell when I do is so that I have money to buy other cards. That was the case up until this year when the value of my collection became so huge that I took all of my money off the table, my initial investment off the table, and I've started taking a little bit more money off the table just as a hedge. And that I'm now putting that money into other things and other investments. But generally speaking, I didn't do that. It was really just I had a big appetite for the collection. I wanted to get one of every PSA 10, card of every single card. I wanted to get every trophy card. I set really big, lofty goals. And in order to do that on a social worker's salary, I needed to raise more capital by buying and selling. But I didn't do it that much, and I did it as sparingly as possible. And for me, the goal was always to invest and to have the biggest, longest term collection, and to get the stuff that I felt would do best long term, and the stuff that I felt like I would enjoy and get the most pleasure from owning long term. So that has always been the model. So, in terms of like investing versus collecting, there are things that I buy purely for collecting, and then there are things that I buy for investing and collecting purposes. I don't think there's anything that I'm invested in that I think is a great investment that I don't also like. I have to like something and enjoy it and be engaged in it as a collector in order to invest in it for me personally. Or else I just don't get the pleasure out of it, and also I'm not going to do like the work that's necessary to know everything about it and probably make good decisions or have the insight. Or have good insight into it, because I am not a collector, so I don't really understand it. So all these things that I'm investing in, I'm a collector in, and love owning, love looking at, love building out the set, love setting new goals, achieving those goals, all that stuff. I think in terms of investing, like, you don't ever have to sell any cards. And they're still an investment. I mean, you can even leave those cards to your kids and they'd be an investment for them or something that they could sell. An investment, your intention may not be to be investing, but you may have assets that ended up being a good investment, or a good, things that you put your money into that ended up growing in value over time, and then you were able to take more money out than you put into it. Great question. I'm not sure, I think that there's a little bit of a weird narrative in the hobby of, like I remember when I went on Frosted Caribou's stream, and I was getting some comments like, you're not a collector because you talk about the money or are interested in the money. And that's a very strange, misguided take. What is a collector? A collector is someone who enjoys the process of collecting, wants to collect the cards, wants to build a big collection. Also, being interested in the money side and being financially savvy doesn't mean you aren't genuinely also interested in the collecting aspects of the hobby. Now, you could just be interested in the financials and making money and not interested in the collecting part. But you can also be very interested in the collecting part and not interested in the financial part, but you can also be both. They're not mutually exclusive. And I think that where I think some of the frustration can come from is that it feels like the money people have made the hobby more expensive for people who didn't care about money and just wanted to collect. And that I totally get, and I empathize. But that doesn't make anyone less of a person or a collector or whatever. So. Some great conversations happening. Definitely encourage you guys to interact with each other as I'm trying to get through these questions, and there's a lot of knowledge in here. Connor B says, Jake, what do you think of Japanese Heart Gold and Soul Silver boosters as a sealed investment? Beautiful pack arts. Prices have been flat while true vintage Japanese has risen. I think Japanese of the middle generations is undervalued relative to what we're seeing going on in other things. I completely agree with you. I think you're right on, Connor. Now, will that take off? Will it be too niche? I'm not really sure. What I do expect to happen, though, is if Diamond and Pearl era and Black and White continue to do really well in English, and people want to open it and do pack openings, and people want to collect those level X's, you're going to see that, just like it did on the English side, trickle down into the Japanese variants. I also think that there are Japanese cards in those sets. For example, the reverse hollow shiny English cards that come in a regular kind of star patterned cool hollow, and the Japanese side are grossly undervalued cards because nobody knows about them, and they're super rare, super hard to find. Blake Darius says, hey Pokenomics, thoughts on long-term value on ultra-modern Mastering sets, just completed set of Champion's Path and Vivid Voltage, debating whether to do the same for Chilling Reign and Shining Fates, but not sure if it's worth it. I would just do modern Master sets if you enjoy it. Will there be a market for people who want to buy a Master set of everything? Probably. I do think a lot of people, though, like to build the Master sets themselves or open the cards and build it out themselves rather than buying the whole thing. I also think that the Master set is filled with cards that have no value but might cost you a little bit to kind of track down and get. And then when you try to resell, you may not be able to get those the prices back for what you put in to try to get them, particularly if you're opening packs to try and pull everything. I think of building ultra modern Master sets as incredible fun. And I think that it's not a advisable thing to do from an investing financial perspective. It's a thing to do to have fun and enjoy your life, which you should be doing. So I'm all the time building Master sets of certain things that, although I think can go up over time and maybe will have some value, like some of my DBZ stuff, it's not the best strategy for maximizing money. If the best strategy would be, even for DBZ, would be to just buy gem mint stuff, pay a really high price for it, and be grading it. And it's often the same case in a lot of in Pokemon and a lot of other things, buying the premium stuff, paying up for it, and grading that instead of buying a lot of more mass produced, less desirable stuff to complete Master sets. But I am the huge fan of Master sets, Blake. So I build Master sets, and it's a lot of fun. Hey Jake, what's your opinion on fan club cards such as Porygon? Love it. Love those cards. Some of my favorite cards in the hobby. Matt Reardon said, on the topic of Worlds promos, what's your thoughts on S. Pratt buying out the non-stamped 2004 Tropical Wind and making prices go crazy on that card? He is currently selling them in PSA 9 and 10. Yeah, I mean, I think it's smart. I'm not sure, was there anything that he did that was a little underhanded in that? I have no idea how that went. Did he talk them up? Did he buy a lot of them and then talk them up without saying that he had a large position in them? That I'm not cool with. I have no idea if he did that. I'm certainly not claiming that. If that's what you're getting at here and you think he did it, that I have a problem with. I think people do it all the time. I think people underestimate how much people do it. But they're cool. Are they awesome? Not to me. I like to have the world stamp on it at least. But it is cool to have that, and it's the hardest year to get, and so for most people, they're never going to even get a stamped one, so let alone a player or staff stamped one, and so to have that to complete their collection, one art from each year, is something that a lot of people are going to want. Those cards were going for literally nothing. I believe those cards were going for $2, $4, $5 this year, right? So they blew up. But it's smart. It's just understanding how markets work. It's understanding where value is, understanding that there really aren't that many of them, how old they are, and how they should be connected to some of the most valuable cards in the hobby, which is some of those stamped cards. By the way, I have no stamped cards from that year. I wish I did those, but I think that they should be some of the more valuable cards in the hobby. That's my personal opinion. And I'm not shilling my own cards. I don't own them, and I wish I did. And I've been trying to buy them for a long time, and I just can't. I can't find them. Just Say says, hey Jake, thoughts on the Pokemon Center number 40 and Lucky Stadium number 41? Want the Black Star promos, undervalued? Not undervalued. They're okay. If anything, I actually have always kind of felt, and I don't mean to hate on it, but I've kind of felt like Lucky Stadium is overvalued. There are a lot of cards that have Charizard in it that Charizard isn't featured as at the front that don't get the same sort of love that that card has because it has a Charizard and a Pikachu in it. So I don't know. I kind of always felt like that one was a bit overvalued. I do own, I think, one of them somewhere. But it's still a cool card. I really like all those Black Star promos. Very collectible. I think collecting all of those things is great. I also think the delivery, Charizard, delivery Pikachu thing and how they're doing a callback to that, it might spark some more interest in those cards in the short term and maybe in the long term too. There's so many great cards that I just, that one never hit me. Those two cards never hit me as like, I really need those cards. I felt more of a strong hit when I saw the play promos and other sorts of cards which are always in a similar value. But a lot of that's subjective, right? That isn't opinion on what the market should do. Chris says, hey Jake, do you think it's a bad time to buy PSA 9 Unlimited Base, Jungle, and Fossil? I've got a Blastoise PSA 9, but wonder if I should sell before a potential big drop. Is it hard to time the market? Yeah, it's impossible to time the market at this point. I felt like the easiest time to time the market was like a month after Logan Paul when everyone was just literally insane. Like, I think people just kind of completely lost their minds. The vast majority of the hobby, and that's when I was selling. That was the only time that I was like, this is clearly an excellent time to sell. I think outside of that, now's, I think, a perfectly fine time to sell. I think now's probably an okay time to buy. Maybe, who the hell knows, right? I mean, it's I would hold the cards that you really like, that you think have the longest upside potential. I wouldn't try to time the market. I wouldn't be selling something now that you're planning on holding for the long term. I wouldn't sell it now and then rebuy at the dip. I think when you start playing those games in this type of period, you might get caught. You might, particularly when you have to pay fees and other sorts of things that constantly take out of it. All right, I think there are literally an endless amount of questions here. I appreciate all the great questions as usual, guys. You guys are the best. I'm just not going to be able to get to most of these. Let's see. Try to pick questions from people who haven't asked one or just new topics. Maybe I'll jump to the bottom of chat and I guess if everyone can take a moment, I haven't said this today. We have, I think, just over 160 some odd people watching. If you can take a second to like the video, just show kind of your appreciation of all the effort and knowledge and free information I give. If you can support the channel as a Patreon member, that would be wonderful. We're going to keep upping the content and try to make this channel grow and be one of the bigger channels in the space. That's my goal, and all of that is helpful for me to then eventually be able to like pay an editor and make the channel better. Buy the equipment, that sort of stuff. And also, if you can subscribe to the channel, it really helps. Getting our channel to have more subscribers, although it may seem it's kind of annoying and may seem trivial, it helps because it adds more legitimacy to the channel. When people look at it, they probably give it more of a chance. And I think the algorithm probably picks up that sort of activity and really starts sharing you with more people. And there's so much noise right now in the Pokemon market. There's so many people around this sort of size that if you guys really like this and appreciate the insight and understand the background I'm coming from, and maybe I do have some pretty unique value in the Pokemon community, if you could help support me get the message out there, I would greatly appreciate that. So that's my plug for today, my sales pitch. All right, back to answering your guys' questions. I'm going to jump to the bottom of the chat. I'm going to start doing some bottom of the chat questions. If I missed your question, feel free to put it again at the bottom of the chat. And I will start grabbing some there. All right. Okay, so we have questions here at the bottom. Any thoughts on the EV Stadium Pokemon Center? Do you have any? Seems like a great card to considering EV Heroes is around the corner. Gosh, I don't even know exactly what that card is. There's like an endless amount of those like promos from that era. I'd have to look it up, and there are lots of questions, so I'm gonna apologize, and I'll look it up for you. All right, 190. Oh, this guy. Yeah, this is a really cool card. I like this card. I don't know the I think I own one of these somewhere. I just loved how it had all of the different evolutions, and I just think it's like a very unique, cool card. So definitely a big fan. Big fan. In terms of like the rarity of that type of card, I don't really know. I don't really know the rarity. I don't think anyone knows exactly those types of things. There are so many of those cards, but I do think that one stands out. And I think when you're looking to buy or invest in some of those cards, it's the ones that stand out that are going to be the ones that make it, because there are going to be so many more of those types of cards released over the years. So you got a super chat, which I appreciate. Ski.read said, "Hope you're having a good day, Jake." Thank you. I hope you're doing well too. Wondering how you feel about CGC accepting Yu-Gi-Oh! And if that will help that market grow. Yeah, it's great. I think that CGC will continue to expand, and having more graders for anything right now is, I think, I think it's good for like, and if they get into like DBS also, which they may, it'll be good for those markets to have a place that isn't completely backed up right now, although they're getting more and more backed up, where they can actually send more and more cards to get graded, which one of the key things in establishing a market and establishing interest is actually having enough inventory on the market for people to buy and engage with. And part of that is there needs to be graded cards. So if modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Or vintage Yu-Gi-Oh! Or I know vintage Yu-Gi-Oh! Already has a huge market, but if Yu-Gi-Oh! Is going to continue to sustain itself and develop more of maybe a modern graded market, and or DBS developing more of a graded market, there needs to be a lot of graded cards for people to buy and sell, so that people then feel more and more comfortable and confident that other people are buying it. That's what ladders up the prices. All right. Apple's GG says, "Hey Jake, any thoughts on Japanese vintage WotC era? Does Raichu have a print mark error on all the cards?" I don't know the answer to that specifically. Definitely not an error expert. Hey Jake, any thoughts on Japanese vintage sets in general, WotC era? Not really. Nothing I haven't said like in past streams. There's it's good. I think that it's been hyped up a lot. There was a lot of money to be made from online pack streamers because it was easier to get that product. It was cheaper to get that product. It had 60 packs, and every pack had a holo, so it was more fun to open. It created better content for people. I think that spurred a lot of the growth, in my honest opinion. In the long run, I think it's good. I do think Japanese in general has been undervalued in the sense that it's the original language. This is stuff that I've said before. It's taking into all those things into account. I'm not really sure where I would place it. I love it though. I like it. I have my real money though in the English side, in the PSA 10 first edition holos. That's where I really feel safest with, and the stuff that I think at the end of the day has the best chance to see that continued growth even during down periods. Noah said, "Could you rank your top 5 favorite EX era sets based on artwork and what you like, or your top 5 favorite EX era sets based on the largest investment potential?" Oh my gosh. Yeah. Sure. I mean, without too much thought, I can throw out 5 names. I'd have to really go through them, But let's go in no particular order, because that'll be easier for me. Let's go EX Sandstorm, Ruby Sapphire, Fire Red Leaf Green, Team Rocket Returns, and Dragon, let's say, would probably be. I like some of the earlier ones. and I really like the Team Rocket Returns art and the art style. That's in terms of what I enjoy, like the hollows and the art styles. Those are my favorite sets. Another super chat here, appreciate it. Maddie Kins. Hey Jake, what are your thoughts on vintage Koro jumbo cards? Yeah, jumbo cards are interesting. There might be a market one day for jumbo cards, particularly vintage jumbo cards, particularly if you keep them in good condition. I imagine if they figure out a way to like frame these things, or if PSA starts to, I know that they do grade them, but if somehow those things like take on and there's a way to display them that's better, and you start seeing influencers buy them, I could see them becoming more valuable. I'm not sure. There's potential, but definitely no guarantee. That's what I would say on those. There are some reasons. There are some good reasons why those have never taken off. There are some bad reasons, we could say. The good reasons that they've never taken off is that they're big. Kind of what do you do with them? That we all collected cards are what we collected, and we're used to that sort of small-looking card. The way our brains work is when something becomes valuable, we associate value with things that look similar to it and are similar. And if something is different, it's not part of that collectible. And so we don't want it as much. It's part of why things like coins or other things in the hobby, it's like once you get into coins, then you really like them, but you kind of have to take that leap to, and I think that there's a little bit of that barrier to entry for jumbos versus regular cards. And there's so many regular cards that it's not like we have an issue with there isn't enough stuff to collect. That's why it's kind of hard to see people jump into those. But, there's already some market for them, obviously. Some of the box toppers, WotC box toppers are valuable. In terms of, specifically your question, the Koro stuff, I don't even know. I'd have to look up the Koro box, the jumbos. I can look them up quickly. I've probably seen them, but offhand, I don't even know. Oh, yeah. Yeah, like the Pokemon Plaza. I think they're cool, but again, what are you going to do with them? And unless they're really minty, which is going to be so hard to find because, like, who kept those in good condition? Are you going to grade the low pumped ones? It's going to cost you a lot of money to grade. Or is anyone going to want to buy it? It's hard to establish that market. I think if you had influencers get into it and start pushing it or selling it or talking about how great it is, or if I started buying them and putting them in the background a little bit and other people started doing that, it could drive the market, because there is something they are very cool and unique. So hopefully that's a helpful answer for you. All right, jumping to the bottom again here. Let's see. Okay, lots of questions. Let's try to. We're gonna do 20 more minutes. Okay. Tem4Elf says, "Did you play all of the Game Boy games? If not, which ones did you miss?" No, I did not. In fact, I didn't play a lot of them. I played Red and Blue and Yellow. Those are the ones, mainly the ones I played. Those are the ones that I've played like over and over and over again into the ground. Then, as far as the other Game Boy games, I played a lot of them over the years, although most of them I played on emulators online, like during college and other periods of my life. I probably played like 4 or 5 of the others. I've probably only played through and beaten maybe like 3 of them or so. And I've actually been playing, I guess we can add another one. I have been playing Sword and Shield recently and did buy that, so I've been playing through that. Professor Oak, is there anyone you view as an absolute pro in the hobby? I'm not sure what you mean by absolute pro. Like, there's so many people that I respect and I think are great. I do think one thing about our hobby is that we're very young. And so I'm not sure there's anyone in the hobby that I'm like, that person is like the person that I think, has so much wisdom and where I agree with almost everything they say. There isn't anyone in the hobby quite like that for me. But there are tons of people that I view maybe as like peers or people who and then there are people who are more experienced that I view as more experienced, and then I sort of learned from in the past, and I feel like I'm at a point now where I'm peerish to them. I'm not sure if they would consider me a peer to them, but I think my level of knowledge and certainly my success is peerish in terms of like building a big collection and doing it in a financially prudent way. I also think you have different elements of the hobby. You have people who are sort of in my wing of the hobby, which is giving, in terms of YouTube, which is giving like talking about like investment ideas and sharing those ideas, versus people who are purely aren't informational at all and are just more on the fun and pure entertainment side of things. So, but I think that there are lots of people that I look up to, and there are lots of people that I have learned a lot from over the years, including people like, certainly Scott Pratt comes to mind quickly. And probably Scott Pratt, Gemmint Pokemon, and TCA Gaming. Probably the three people that, for me, their content and listening to them and engaging with them were the people who I feel like I introduced me, and I'm not even sure, like definitely gave me good information and things that I didn't know, and I learned from them, but also it was just fun seeing them do what they did, and that inspired me to do what I'm doing now. Teach Me How says, thoughts on quantity of cards over quality. Would it be a safer investment in a bunch of $50 to $100 cards compared to a few $1,000 cards? It just completely depends on the cards. So safer, maybe. Yeah, I mean, the issue with quantity is how difficult it is to sell, and then your fees associated, like shipping and stuff, taking a larger portion. The other issue is just the amount of time, right, and effort that takes, let alone the money part. I think when you're looking at quality is going to have a better chance of probably sustaining, particularly during difficult down periods in the hobby and going up. And high quality is also probably has the best chance of like really exponentially huge growth over 20 years, over really long periods. I think in the short term though, it can be more risky because you're putting a lot more money. You're not diversifying. If you just have one very expensive item versus diversifying yourself in 1,000, medium level items, if some of those items go down, and some go up, you're basically neutral. Whereas if you have all your money in one big item and that item really halves in value, you lost a huge amount, immediately. So I think that's certainly true. Bruno come on said, hey Jake, can you talk about Pokemon cards in other languages, please? I'm Brazilian and I can't figure it out. I'm afraid of spending money on Portuguese cards because I never see them growing in value. Certainly they have grown in value. I don't follow Portuguese cards that closely. I follow a little bit. I don't know. It's just not my market. I'm not engaged in the Portuguese market. I don't know who exactly is buying it. Is it English speakers who are buying that as a completionist because they want one of every card in every language? Is it people in this country who speak Portuguese? Is it people in Brazil who speak Portuguese? Who's buying? Who's interested? What's the market? It's just not something I have a lot of info on or knowledge of. So I apologize. I can't give any more insight. Curtis James says, hi, Jake. People on online forums are always talking about keeping sealed modern products, and they think that those products will 5x or 10x in value after 10 years. What if too many people do that? Yeah, I don't think these guys know what they're talking about. that's a huge part of the hobby, unfortunately, and they're just completely ignoring history of other hobbies and basic supply and demand fundamentals. And you're exactly right, Curtis. So I don't know how many guys are doing that anymore. And I think it also depends on what price. Now, 5 to 10x, no way. It's not going to happen. Like, you know, I and I could be wrong. You know, I'm amazed at the growth in the modern sealed product market that we've had this year. To me, it's crazy bubble nonsense, and I do think it's going to pop and go down quite a bit more than it already has. We've already seen retraces on some stuff. I think there's going to be a lot more. I think it's going to coincide with the pop reports exploding and the PSA cards going down in value. And just more and more new sets coming out, kind of pushing some of these older sets that people were really enjoying at first initially, and YouTubers were really, to go to the point of my last video, right, the jokey video. Yeah, it's a complete lack of understanding how those values were built. Those values were not built because steadily more people wanted those products. Those values were built because we had a humongous influx of people all of a sudden, and very little product that was enough for people for the demand of like a year ago. Pokemon's going to scale and has been probably scaling in terms of how much they're putting out, and so there's just going to be the same thing isn't going to happen again. And I just worry how many investor speculator types are holding these products versus actual collectors. I don't know how many collectors who are collecting 15 to 20, modern booster boxes as like pieces they want to keep forever. I think part of it's probably that they want to sell them eventually and make some money off of it or have some value. I just bought Mega Man stuff from 2004 and Austin Powers, and I know it's not Pokemon, but these are, popular franchises for $20, right? I can get cards from 2004. Are people really going to want to open these like middle random generation Pokemon sets when they have so many other options, so many vintage non-Pokemon vintage options, vintage Pokemon options, brand new Pokemon sets? It's a lack of, I don't have a nicer way of saying it. It's a complete lack of understanding of all the fundamentals that can make up the market and what it's going to take for that to happen. Now, could it 5x or 10x in value? Anything can happen, obviously. I mean, anything is possible. I mean, we had Evolution's 6x or 7x in value this year, right? We've had other sets, other modern sets do that too. But again, that was a perfect storm. That is the emergence of this hobby as an actual established hobby. That isn't something that is going to be replicated again, ever, probably. We'll probably never, ever have a time or experience this type of growth in this short amount of time ever again in Pokemon, I would say. Or the only way it's going to happen is if the hobby kind of dies, people disappear, and then it has some sort of resurgence or something. So I don't know if these guys are trying to like convince each other or convince themselves or just get other people to buy off of them, or what's happening. But I think that unfortunately a lot of people have fallen for this, and they're the ones that all bought it and raised the prices, and the people like me, who are actually planning on holding things forever and see that long-term value in things have just no interest in that product just over MSRP, let alone the types of prices that it's getting at now. But we'll see. The market will decide these things in the long run. Pokebarn said, is there any... I'm sure I'll get some downvotes, some dislikes for that answer. Pokebarn, is there any modern set you bought recently or any... And I guess before I move on, one caveat to that, Curtis, is like something like Hidden Fates has some chance. These historic multi-generational sets that could become these amazing things do have some chance. I just don't see it for the others. And Evolutions has a chance. As much as I think Evolutions is ridiculous and I do think it's going to crash and burn in the long run. I think I really believe that. I do think that Evolutions has more of a chance because it's something different. It's that reprint of base set. And the fact that so many people opened so much of it this year and had fun with it and maybe cut into what seems to just be an unbelievable endless supply of it, it's possible. You keep those sealed boxes sealed and they do go up to, I can't imagine $10,000, but that's why that video is a ridiculous nonsense joke. But, going up to 2,000, 3,000, which would be a humongous amount of money. I think people don't understand how much $2,000 is. That's a humongous sum of money. And people are just throwing it around right now in the hobby like it's nothing, right? $2,000 should be for a historic, important, rare items in the world. If you go into other hobbies with $2,000, you can buy key items from the hobby. To me, Evolutions is a garbagey reprint. That was it's supposed to just be fun. And not this important keystone of the hobby, but it could be a keystone if people decide it is. And there are people pushing that narrative. I feel differently, but it's all narratives at the end of the day. Whatever narrative wins, I'm not sure. I don't see how a narrative, though, can be built around, like, Vivid Voltage is a great set, or trying to think of, like, I don't know, some, like, middling set. We'll see how Chilling Reign does. Like, I don't know. But that's what I talked to and have been warning people about for a long time, so we'll see. Again, it's not really going to correspond till the PSA cards come back and prices crash because of that. Pokemon Card, is there any modern set you've bought recently or any coming out you're thinking of buying? So I have some, I didn't buy these. I have some Shining Fates still here that we are going to open eventually for the channel as a thank you and a giveaway for all of you guys, wonderful subscribers and supporters, just to celebrate the 1 year anniversary of the channel. So I want to do that. In terms of me actually buying Pokemon, I don't buy Pokemon because it's just overpriced. The modern stuff to me is overpriced unless I can pre-order it. And I just have fun opening things like Mega Man or whatever. I'm opening some what's it called? Nightmare Before Christmas stuff I just bought. I got like 6 boxes for like $5 a box, these types of things. Now I think all this stuff has gone up in value since I bought it, because a lot of people I think are doing that. Because it's just fun to open vintage stuff and see cards and chase them and learn about new things. To me, that's a lot more fun than paying way too much money for a modern set that's probably going to be worth very little. Now, there are singles and there are like I bought the Amazing Rares because I really like the Amazing Rares, and I just bought those off the market just recently because I waited for them to come all the way down in price because I knew how easy they were to pull. They came all the way down, picked up those. What else? But, in terms of, or if you can get product at pre-order, I think it's pretty good value. They're expensive. $90 is a lot, but $95, $100, whatever you get it for, is a lot of money. It's fun. It's really enjoyable to do, to open product and to open modern Pokemon, and I do try and do that when I do get that stuff. All right, just a couple more questions, and then we're gonna end for today. Thank you all so much for hanging out. Got about 4 minutes left. Okay, Nathan Gardner said, "Did you see Twice Baked Jake's comment on you?" A couple people sent me a video just saying that he had someone had asked him a question, I think, about coming on for an interview, and him saying that he would be interested in. I don't think he said me specifically, but he'd be interested in doing collabs in the future and would be interested in maybe doing a collab with me or something like that. I invited him on a few months ago I wanted to talk about his videos and do you think that they have an effect on the market, and really have that more broad discussion of who he is, what his background is he buying and selling, where's his knowledge base coming from, so people can actually get to know him better. And what his goals are for his channel. And I'm not sure, he probably got lost in his Instagram. He may have never seen it, or he, did see it and ignored it and didn't want to come on, which is completely reasonable and doesn't upset me at all. But just to be transparent with you guys. So I would be happy to talk with him. You guys know I'm pretty happy to talk with anyone. I have people who have big channels on here. I have people who have small channels. For me, it's just about providing interesting conversations and content. I'm much more interested in interesting topics than I am in people who have a big following or a small following. The real reason I want to talk to him is I think that his channel has had a pretty significant impact on prices of certain things, and And I know that he says that it hasn't, and I'm interested in having that conversation to see if he's interested in, and I'm also interested in his outlook and his, honestly, as a person, I'm interested in who he is and his experience in the hobby so far. And I really don't know much about him, to be honest. Andrew Sherman says, why don't you think the market will realize that CGC 9.5 is equivalent to PSA 10? The hobby only gets smarter over time, right? As a value investor, I would think you'd be more optimistic. Or is it only psychology that people will always pay more for the 10, even though they know condition is comparable? Yeah, that's the one issue, right, is the 10, is the psychology of the 10. I didn't say that I don't think it will get there. I just said that I don't trust that it will definitely get there. And there's no reason for me to take that gamble right now, unless you're flipping into the market. If you're flipping into the market, you need to grade your cards and sell them, and you can't wait for PSA to open up. But someone like me who isn't doing that right now, the cards that I have, I can wait for things to calm down and eventually grade with PSA again, or I can wait for the CGC prices to pick up. So hopefully that makes sense. So, but I completely agree with you, and I do operate generally under the principle that the market is always very irrational and doing things wrong, and I can capitalize or take advantage on the mistakes that the vast majority of people are making, and that over time the market will correct for some of its mistakes and then make new mistakes, and the trick is always being ahead of that correction. And this could be an example of that, right? And so, as I've said, and I think I said this on PokeNav's channel, I think buying 9.5 CGCs for undervalue and waiting for them to maybe reach or gain value and get closer to the PSA 10 value is an interesting play right now. But I'm not sending in cards, you see, to get the lower value. I hope that makes sense to people. Those are two very different ideas and different things. Okay, I'm going to jump to the bottom just because we're about to say goodbye. Jonathan Prisby said, yeah, man, I would love to see a video with you and Twice Big Jake. He did say you specifically. I would watch that so hard. Yeah. I will say, like, he's a very likable guy and has done a really good job of bringing a lot of people into the hobby, and people really like him and enjoy him, and I think he deserves congratulations and respect for the channel that he built and the quality, enjoyable content that he puts out for people, teaching them so much about the new stuff in the hobby. So my only criticism, is not even I think my only criticism, if there's a criticism, is not acknowledging or taking as seriously his responsibility. And I think underplaying his effect on the market, and then also underplaying the fact that how much he talks about investing and how much of his channel is actually about money and finance, instead of just about like what looks cool and what's fun. And I think that he's sort of like he's an investing channel, I think, or he talks mostly about the money and the financial stuff. That's what he does. And then to say that he doesn't, or I'd love to like flesh that out with him and to see what he really thinks, or how he kind of finds that line. And I think what's also really fair to say is, like, he's new to this. He doesn't necessarily know exactly what he wants his channel to be, and he can figure that out over time too, and become different things or move different directions. And I think everyone should want everyone to succeed. So I think wanting him to succeed is really good. And he's been a definite net positive on the hobby this year, for sure. Having his channel and just like other channels, right, that people were able to find and grab onto. TCG Amigo says, I'll try once more. Maybe I'll get lucky. Can you give me your opinion on at what point PSA pops of a single card is too high to be interesting? Thanks in advance and have a great day. So it's not about, so it depends on the card. So the higher demand the card has, or you think will have, the more PSA cards will be able to be absorbed right into the market from whatever that card is. So no one has the answer for what that looks like, but a card like, if you had 10,000 I don't know, reverse hollow Weedles from PSA 10 Weedles or PSA 9 Weedles from Evolutions, I think that'd be way too much. I don't think that there's enough people to buy that card at $10 if there are that many of those to even get you out of the money you put into the card. But if you have 10,000 Hidden Fates Charizards, I think that there are certainly 10,000 people who would pay a few $100s or something like that. Maybe even $500, $600, $700, maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000 in the future, maybe 3,000, 4,000 one day. It's all possible, but when you have those really high pops, you need a lot more demand to keep them up. And there's going to be a lot more that's always coming on the market, which isn't going to create that feeling of scarcity, which isn't going to create that feeling of fear of missing out, which then doesn't push the prices up. Okay, so I'm going to end it there for today. I see there are a lot of great questions here at the bottom, and I apologize, but I'm going to try to keep these so I don't burn myself out. Keep these just from 3 to 5 as much as I can. Thank you all so much for hanging out today. Great to see you. If you can like the video and subscribe on the way out, I would appreciate it. And I will catch all of you guys next Sunday. All right, and we'll have more videos for you this week. All right, take care.